Recently, a draft decision from the Supreme Court was leaked from Samuel Alito's desk that suggests that the court is looking to overturn Roe v. Wade, which would basically put abortion rights back in the hands of the states rather than having a federal policy that it is protected under law. And there are a lot of things I could say on this, and I suppose I'll just start by saying that I am indeed pro choice, and I don't want to change that opinion, so don't try. And there's a lot of reasons why I could put that forward. I would love to go into more detail about how this doesn't really feel like states' rights issues, or that it seems like every time we talk about states' rights, it's to take rights away rather than to add them to the conversation. I could talk to you about how it doesn't seem right that we are going to start forcing women to have children in a country where we have no paid leave, where we don't have a universal health care system, where we refuse to do anything about environmental policies so those kids have clean water and clean air, where we don't have a free lunch program so we can make sure that they're getting a nutritious diet when they're in our school system, etc., etc. I could go into all of that. There's plenty of good points to go around, and I really wish I was hearing more people make them. But I thought that I would start focusing in on something that I hear the pro life division talk about that seems to be the crux of their argument, and that is that life begins at conception. In fact, I remember seeing something from Big Brain Ben Shapiro that said that the only possible thing that you can say about when life begins is at conception. That's the only thing. And obviously, he's wrong about that because we're having a conversation about it. If we weren't having a conversation about it, if it was the only thing, there would be no debate to be had. But I want to explain to the people like Ben that, one, that sounds like a feeling more than a fact, but then also that, no, I make the argument that life, for all intents and purposes, in the society we live in, starts at birth. That's the only opinion that matters. But you see, unlike Ben, I'm actually going to go into detail about why I say that. Because it's not just about how you feel or your religious beliefs, but it's about, functionally, how it works in society. Here's some things I want you to consider. I'm going to go back to George Carlin for a minute, the true prophet, who asked some very simple questions about this. Well, okay, if life begins at conception, then why aren't unborn fetuses counted in the census? When you have a stillbirth or a miscarriage, do we hold a funeral? I go even one step further and ask, do we have a gravesite? Do they get buried? Is there a headstone? Oh, and while we're on the topic of headstones, go to a graveyard sometime. Look around. There are two dates that are listed on every single one of those gravestones: your birth date and your date of death. But if life begins at conception, shouldn't your conception date be on there? No, of course it's not on there, because no one can even tell what day you're conceived on. I mean, maybe now they can do a little bit better job at approximating, but no one knows that date, because it's a concept. It's a concept until it is proven. For me, an in utero fetus is basically the Schrodinger's cat here. We don't know if it's going to be a full fledged person. Who could possibly tell? It's there. It could become a person, but we don't really know yet. Some don't. The idea of saying that life begins at conception is like saying that I plant a seed in the ground and now I have a tomato plant. No, you don't. You planted a seed. You have no fruits yet. What are you talking about? I don't call an egg an unborn chicken. I call it an egg. Hey, when do we issue birth certificates and social security numbers? Hey, when do child support payments start? It doesn't start at conception. I can tell you that much. For all intents and purposes, the society recognizes that people are people when they are born. Because here's the thing that no one really wants to get around to saying, but I think it's important to clarify it here for anyone who happens to be watching. this really isn't a case of pro-life versus pro-choice. Those were terms that we came up with a long time ago to try and explain what we believed in. But that's not really the debate, is it? Because life is a very big concept. Everyone's technically for life as a general concept. I mean, there's life on Mars, or so I have heard. But here's the thing. Finding bacteria on Mars can constitute life. But if I go to Mars and I step on those bacteria, I didn't cause a mass murder. I didn't murder a whole bunch of organisms. If I mow my lawn, I didn't decapitate a bunch of people. What we're really arguing about is when personhood starts. Yeah, that's basically it. If you talk to a lot of vegetarians or vegans, they'll actually tell you that for them, animals achieve a certain level of personhood. And that's the reason why they don't want to eat meat. Well, at least some of them will probably make that argument if it's on moral grounds. So if you're eating a steak, and they come to you and say, I don't think you should be eating that steak, because for me, that's a person, you're probably going to just keep eating that steak. But if they then came with the federal government to tell you that you can't eat that steak because it's their morality, so now it's your morality, you'd probably have an issue with it. Personhood is the real key. There are people who believe that personhood starts at conception. And then there are other people that say that it starts at birth or slightly before that, perhaps. That's really the key. When have you achieved personhood? Now, for me, I don't really think that you can verify personhood until a person is out of the womb and able to breathe and eat on their own, wear their own clothes, they have a name, a whole bunch of other things like that. That constitutes personhood for me. For a person like Ben, it's when an egg gets fertilized. Okay, there's some problems with that too. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk in religious terms. I hope the evangelicals are out there listening, because here's some questions you probably didn't want to ask, but we're here now, so we're going to have to ask them. Okay, so biological process. Women will have a period every month. And the eggs that she ends up sloughing out of her system every month can be fertilized eggs. It is very possible. So, wait a second. Now we have to ask a question. God made women menstruate, and if fertilized eggs are people, then God wanted to abort a bunch of kids every month for women all over the globe? Uh-oh. That's a hard thing to figure out, right? Because then that would mean, if God is infallible and doesn't make any mistakes, that he kind of did a lot of abortions. So if God doesn't make mistakes and fertilization means life, that's where personhood begins for you, then God aborts a lot of kids. And if he doesn't make mistakes, that means that apparently abortion is something God does. So why would we criticize people for doing what God does? Here's another thing to consider. Religious scholars have asked a question for a long time about what happens to an aborted fetus. Do they go to heaven or do they go to hell? And the general consensus that I've heard is that, well, original sin, that thing where we're just bad, happens when you're born. It's almost like that's when we actually determine that personhood has been established. But it happens when you're born. So, since a fetus has not been born, it hasn't committed original sin. Therefore, it goes to heaven. Okay, so An aborted fetus automatically goes to heaven. Golden ticket doesn't have original sin. However, if the child is born and it dies from SIDS or from neglect or poor care, maybe a lack of health care for a medical problem that they have that we didn't give them, or maybe there's lead in the water, or a whole bunch of other things that we obviously could have probably solved if we really cared about the kids in the first place, then they haven't been absolved of their sins yet, so wouldn't that mean that they go to hell? So wouldn't it mean that the pro-life division is really just giving kids the opportunity to go to hell? What lovely folks these seem like. These are the folks trying to claim moral hierarchy? What? What ghouls are you? What weird religious freaks? I don't understand this at all. I'm just very, very confused by this whole thing, and it gets me very upset. As you can probably tell, since I haven't made a video in almost a year on this channel. And I'm doing it for this. Because this speaks to a much larger problem. You see this happening with trans rights and gay rights and people pushing back against civil rights groups and saying that they're terrorists. Now you see it with reproductive rights, and eventually they're going to be coming for contraception. Some states are already looking at that. The problem is, I'm going to be outing myself here, a straight, cis, white male of a middle-class, Christian, conservative background, you wouldn't think that this affects me, but I know that it does. I know that it does. It's the canary in the coal mine. You see other people having their rights taken away. And that should be a signal to you that it will come for you too. And there is never a case where one group getting their rights taken away somehow benefits another group. No matter how much they think it will, it never does. It's the swimming pool situation. You know, the white folks and the black folks both paid for the swimming pool, but only the white folks were allowed to use it. And then the black folks said, well, we want to use it too. I mean, we're paying for it. So the courts say, okay, everybody can use it. And so they cement over the swimming pool so no one can use it. Let's all live in oppression equally rather than in freedom. I don't like it. Not at all. And hey, think of it this way, boys, if you're like me, I want you to consider this. If we're going to say that the government, whether it be state or federal, can challenge bodily autonomy, and their real goal is to get rid of abortions, who's to say that they can't make requirements of you and me? What's to say, like, okay, if we want to get rid of abortions, there's a really easy way to do it. You know, we need to stop fertilizing eggs because life begins at conception. So here's what we do. Every male, before they reach sexual maturity, has to have a vasectomy. There we go. If we're going to just try to cut out abortions from this equation, well, every male has to have a vasectomy. That will solve the problem real quick. If the sperm can't fertilize an egg, I guess that's all we need. Hey, we solved the problem. Congratulations. Everybody goes home a winner. And you'd say, but Nathan, well, hey, how are we going to procreate? That's easy. In vitro fertilization. We have the technology now. They'll just get some of your little swimmers from the pack and... But then the woman would have to choose. The woman would have to decide that she wanted to do that. But of course, it's not really about the kids. It's not really about that. It's about going after women. If this was about men, we wouldn't be having this argument. If men were the ones that got pregnant, there would be an abortion clinic next to every Starbucks in America. Let's just get past that bullshit argument, okay? If this was about kids, there wouldn't be a bunch of kids in cages down at the border that we're apparently just fine with, okay? If this was about kids, we would hold fathers much more responsible. We would track down deadbeat dads. We would take rape more seriously. We'd investigate all those rape kits that are holed up in an evidence locker somewhere. We'd actually care about this stuff. We'd be trying to build a future for those kids. We'd want to put stimulus money toward getting those kids out of poverty. It's not about the kids. We don't care about them. We never have. This is about keeping people poor. This is about an idealistic religious sect in the country that wants to put their beliefs on everybody else. And the reason I know that is because They care so much about the fetus, but they will not care about the child. Not when they're out. They will give dime zero to them once they are out. Because that is not what they care about. They never have. They will fight against it adamantly. The second that you tell them that all of those kids are going to, go to school and you're going to be paying for it, they're not going to be happy. When you tell them that, well, the rich and the wealthy are still going to have the abortions, it's going to be the poor and the impoverished that are going to be forced to have kids, which means that they're probably going to be on welfare and social assistance programs. They don't want to pay for that. They don't care what happens to the kid after they're born, just when they're in the womb. And isn't that kind of evil if you think about it? Let's birth these kids into a world that we are going to make them suffer in. We are going to make them pay for. We are going to make a living hell for them. And if they fall by the wayside at any time, we will condemn them. We will throw them in jail, and we will say that they are damned for all eternity. Hell, if we had aborted the fetus, they would have gone straight to heaven. Seems like I was trying to do the good and justly thing. There's a whole section of Numbers in the Bible that talks about how to perform an abortion. I don't even get the religious argument. Maybe they're pulling from a specific Bible. Maybe the Bible they're pulling from doesn't have that information in it. Like it's a Mad Libs Bible that they just fill in at random. Oh no, they wouldn't like that because eventually the book would ask them for a pronoun. Oh my God. Okay, here's another way you could look at this. Let's look at it from the democratic process, okay? Let's say there are two parties. There is a fertilized egg or a fetus, and there is the woman. Okay, we have the two parties here. And there are people that say that the woman takes precedent, and there are people that say that the fetus takes precedent. Okay, you with me so far? Okay, let's ask them how they feel. Well, the woman will tell you exactly what she wants. Then you'll ask what the fetus wants. And I don't know about you, but I've never gotten a clear answer from a fetus about what they want. They seem to be fairly nonverbal. So we have one clear opinion and essentially one abstaining. Okay, that's a decision. There you go. We asked both parties. One had an opinion. The other abstained. We voted. Congratulations. People can say that that doesn't seem fair because the fetus can't speak, but then again, I mean, I could go to other examples of where this makes sense. I mean, you could talk to a pig and ask a pig if it wants to be bacon, and if it could understand you and could talk back, it would probably tell you that it doesn't want to be bacon. But since it doesn't say that, it becomes bacon. There's all this talk, too, about, like, that we shouldn't even have exceptions for, like, rape and incest. And I sit there and think to myself, oh, okay, so let's just make sure that the rapist has more rights than the victim. Yeah, that seems like a functioning society. I don't really understand how 20% of the population can consistently get what they want over the 80% of the population. Doesn't seem like a democracy working the way it should. And yeah, this might motivate people, but that's not the point. The point is, that's not a functioning democracy. But I don't think that the people that are on the minority side here care about having a democracy. Not anymore. And maybe we'll expand upon that on the next video. Speaking of which, I know that this is the first video that I've done in a very long time. I stepped away from the channel for a while. I didn't really know what I was going to be coming back to talk about. I did seriously consider coming back to talk about Ukraine, but I don't really know what more I could add to that conversation rather than Slava Ukraine, like, free Ukraine, Putin bad. I don't like Russia in this context. Like, I learned Russian in school, so I feel like I have a little bit of knowledge of just the culture and the language, at least. And yeah, Russia bad now. Putin bad specifically. Russia not bad, but Putin bad, and what he's doing bad, and Ukraine should be free, and I hope they fight back with every fiber of their being, and anything that we can do to help them in that regard without starting World War III would be nice. I would love to talk about critical race theory, but honestly, like, what am I going to say about that? That it's just a scapegoat so that a bunch of people can try and pass through their culture war bullshit on people. It's a trigger word for a whole bunch of folks that they use to denote anything that they don't like. I guess I could have made videos on all of this. I guess I'm just lazy. I've been doing other things. I do other things. Not just this. Also, I got the green screen. Your prophecy for the day. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Should also apply to childbearing.